Right about 9:31, new poll just in America's newsroom on the health care law. Most people expect a repeal of that law if Governor Romney wins the White House come November. Check it out from Rasmussen Reports. 80% of voters surveyed, they say they believe the governor's promise to scrap the legislation. Just 15% say a repeal is unlikely. That poll done in the days after the Supreme Court upheld the health care law. That is a snapshot of what you're feeling at home.
Well, we talk a lot about jobs and the economy, of course, but there's a new really hot-button issue that is starting to become a lot more important in the campaign for the White House for 2012, because we've got looming mandatory defense budget cuts up to $1 trillion over the next 10 years, a number that the defense secretary has called devastating. He's a member of the administration, of course. Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta says that these reductions, if indeed they happen, will lead to the smallest ground force that the U.S. military has had since 1940. It would leave a naval fleet of fewer than 230 ships. That's the lowest level that we've had in the Navy since 1915. And it would leave the smallest tactical fighter force in the history of the Air Force. So these are all things we really need to think about as the possibility that they may kick in. So joining me is a man who thinks about this an awful lot. He's California Congressman Bud McKeon. He is the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. You've really been passionate about this issue. You know, we talk about sequestration and what it means, but this is what it really means, a devastating impact, you feel, on our defense systems.
You know, last September, we held 6 hearings. The first 5 were the impact that this would be on the defense of our nation. You know, the Constitution does say that we should provide for the common defense of the nation. So that's very, very important. We do not have a defense industry to provide jobs. That's a side benefit. But the last hearing we held was what the economic impact would be on our nation if these sequestration cuts came through. And one of the professors that came from George Mason University had done a study. He said that we could lose 1.5 million jobs. That's out of uniformed military personnel, defense people that work for the civil defense, and then the contractors. And I'm going to say today for the first time, we do have the director of OMB coming in. I was meeting with one of the top industry leaders. He went to the OMB to find out what direction the administration was giving him. You know, the administration has just backed away from this. The president's been out campaigning, and they've just ignored this. But it's huge. So what the director of OMB told this industry leader was, don't pay any attention to it, don't worry about it, it's not going to happen. So we have him coming in to testify. We have the industry leaders coming in July.
What does that mean? So the head of OMB says to this industry leader in the defense industry, don't worry about the sequestration thing and all the defense cuts you're hearing about. It's not going to happen? Why would he say that when the president has said he would veto any bill that would turn these cuts back?
Yeah,
what's going on?
It's hard to imagine. I think that what we really need to find out, that's why we have him coming in to testify. We want to ask him, why are you giving this kind of information? Why are you telling him the law states that this is going to kick in? You know, the super committee was supposed to fix it. I've heard people say, well, we'll fix it during the lame duck session. But it needs to be fixed right now.
You know, one of the things that really strikes me about this is the sequestration, as you know, just to remind everybody, came about as a result of an inability to come to a grand bargain agreement, right? To cut spending really across the board in a lot of areas. But the only area that seems to have really come under any cuts after all of that fell through is our defense of our country, right? So, I mean, we're not having these talks talking about cutting back benefits or services in any way. We're really focused when it comes to cutting spending on defense, right?
Defense accounts for about 17% of our overall spending. Right. And yet half of the savings that we've generated from these cuts are coming out of defense. So I think it's time for people to really focus in on this. I think it's going to be a campaign issue because the president's not addressing it. And I know Mr. Romney has said he's going to he's going to replace these cuts. He's going to build the military up. He understands. You know, one of the top leaders, military leaders in the nation told me a couple of months ago, in his 37 years in this business, he'd never seen a time as dangerous as right now. We look at Iran, we look at North Korea, we look at the Arab Spring, we look at the things happening around the world, and we're choosing at this time to cut $1 trillion out of our defense.
Well, it's interesting because it is twofold, as you say, with this issue. You've got jobs and you've got readiness. So the readiness issue, you folks have talked about quite a bit in terms of outlining how it would change our readiness and our capability. The jobs issue, it strikes me, when we talk about this fiscal cliff that could happen at the beginning of the next year, this is part of that. Because when you talk about companies, including defense companies and so many companies across the country, who say they don't know what they're planning. And you talk to these defense industry leaders, they're saying the same thing to you. We don't know what this means for us and jobs, right?
The sequestration that kicks in January 2nd will be like $1.1, $1.2 trillion of cuts. Now, I've just been talking on the defense side, and that will amount to about 1.5 million jobs, which puts us back up to about 10% unemployment again. So when we've got this shaky recovery, we're talking about losing that many jobs, and that's just half of it. What about on all the social spending side? We're going to cut FBI, we're going to cut education, we're going to cut all the social spending. That's another $500 or $600 billion. Yeah. So the job losses on that side will push us up, well up over 10%. I think this has got to be something that the president ought to look at.
Indeed. Congressman Buck McKeon, it's great to see you, sir. Thank you for coming in to the studio
Well,
from America's Newsroom. We're going to be following this, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.